Washington, D.C., 2025. The newsroom was quiet in the way only modern newsrooms can be, cold screens flickering, Slack channels buzzing in silence, and a tension that hummed beneath the glass walls like trapped electricity. Britney Lewis didn't look up from her notes when Matt Taglia entered. She'd worked with him before. He never made a big entrance. The man had the charisma of a spreadsheet, but she trusted him more than any pundit in D.C. "You've got 10 minutes, she said, clicking the mic on. "Then let's make them matter," Matt replied, slipping into the chair opposite her. She didn't need small talk. They had the new June numbers from Emerson college polling, and the country was already buzzing. Trump, now 6 months into his second term, had hit a wall. "What's the number?" she asked. Matt didn't check his notes. He knew it cold. 45 approve. 46 disapprove. So he's underwater now. Technically? Yes. First time since January. Britney scribbled that down. 1 point underwater. Not enough to panic yet. But this town didn't wait for landslides. It tracked the slow erosion like Wall Street tracked interest rates. Independence? -12, Matt said. They'd been drifting away for months. Now it's measurable. Britney frowned. She remembered the post-inauguration bump Trump had ridden back in January. Stability had been the buzzword. Continuity, experience, even. Return to order. Now the glow had faded, replaced with headlines about inflation, Middle East tensions, and the creeping sense that no one was really in control. Right track, wrong track? She asked. 47% say right track. 53% say wrong track. Matt paused, letting the weight of that linger. Among independents, it's worse, 42/59. And remember, that's a forced binary. No neutral option. They had to choose. Britney looked up. That's not nothing. No, Matt said. It's not. She clicked her pen once, then again. You think this is the floor? Matt didn't answer immediately. He hated speculation, but the moment required more than numbers. Depends what happens internationally. And economically. But if things get worse, this isn't the floor, it's just the start of the slope. She leaned back. What about historical context? Second-term presidents, are dips like this normal? Somewhat, he said. Bush didn't drop until Iraq turned. Biden never recovered after Afghanistan. Trump's trend? It's more stable erosion. No collapse. Just gravity doing its thing. The room fell quiet. In the background, a monitor played muted B-roll of Trump shaking hands in Tel Aviv. A Churin read, U.S. airstrikes in Iran, fallout continues. So let's zoom out, Britney said. Midterms. 2026. Who's got the edge? Democrats. Barely. Matt opened his iPad. Generic congressional ballot, Democrats +3. Independents lean D by 10 points. Presidential generic ballot? Tied at 42. That's a shift. Only slightly, Matt said. But it's real. She raised a brow. How much of this is about the president, and how much is about everything else? Most of it is about perception, he said. People feel squeezed. Politically, economically, emotionally. They're tired. Of both sides, frankly. But Trump holds the power, and that means he holds the responsibility. Britney took a breath. She had one more angle she wanted to hit. 2028. Matt smiled for the first time. Everyone's favorite parlor game. Who's leading on the Democratic side? Pete Buttigieg, 16%. Then Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom at 12%. AOC and Josh Shapiro tied at 7%. So not a progressive wave? Not nationally, he said. AOC dominates under 30s, but there's no widespread surge. The base isn't coalescing. Last time you asked this question, Kamala was on top. Yep. That was open-ended. Now it's multiple choice, and the field's widened. Britney jotted down Buttigieg 16 / Kamala 12 / Newsom 12 / AOC 7 / Shapiro 7. The math told a story, no frontrunner, just fragments of old coalitions trying to reform. What about Republicans? J.D. Vance, by a mile, 46%. Rubio? 12%. The rest are background noise. Trump passed the torch? Matt didn't hesitate. Unofficially. But the base got the message. Britney stood. Interview done. Anything else I should know? She asked. Matt gathered his notes. Just this, he said. 52% of Americans believe a world war is likely in the next 4 years. That's up 2 points since March. She stopped. 52? He nodded. And that's not a partisan number. That's a gut-level fear. Britney didn't write it down. She just stood there, staring at the muted war footage on the screen behind Matt's chair. 1 point underwater. And the tide was rising. Cincinnati, Ohio, 2025. The stage was minimal, navy curtains, an American flag, and a massive LED screen behind it showing the words, "A New American Century, J.D. Vance for the Future." To the crowd, it felt like a campaign launch. To J.D. Vance, it felt like a coronation. He hadn't declared anything officially. He didn't need to. The June poll from Emerson had spoken louder than any speech. 46% of Republican voters said they wanted Vance as their next presidential nominee. Marco Rubio trailed far behind at 12%. Everyone else was in the statistical dust. The crowd inside the convention center was electric. Trump signs were still present, but smaller, faded. Vance signs were crisp, new, and confident. MAGA hadn't disappeared. It had just evolved. Backstage, Vance adjusted his cufflinks. The gold ones? The ones Trump had given him in private last Christmas. No cameras, no press. Just a quiet handoff between two men who understood the code. "You ready, boss?" his aide asked, peeking through the curtain. Vance nodded. "Time to speak their language." He stepped out to thunderous applause. They were chanting his name before he said a word. "I'm not here to give a campaign speech," he began, smiling. "I'm here to remind you, this country still belongs to you." Roars. Cheers. Applause lines written in the blood of populism. "They say we've gone too far. That we've pushed the boundaries of immigration law, of trade policy, of foreign engagement. You know what I say?" He leaned forward. "We haven't gone nearly far enough." The crowd surged. He didn't need polling data to know the line landed, but he had it anyway. He'd read the Emerson numbers the morning they came out. 68% of Americans still supported birthright citizenship, but the Republican base? Split right down the middle, 49 to 51. It was a line he could walk, and eventually, push. "They say we should soften. That we should moderate to win over independence. I say, stand your ground, and the country will come to you." In the back row, a tall man in a gray suit stood still as stone. Former Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He wasn't clapping. "What's his angle?" one of his staffers asked, nodding toward the stage. "It's not an angle," Rubio said quietly. "It's a takeover." Washington, D.C., the next day. Britney Lewis sat in the green room of WNN's Capitol studio, watching the Vance speech replay on loop. His delivery was sharp. Controlled. He'd shaved the rough edges from his 2022 Senate persona, but the core message remained. America first, with teeth. Her phone buzzed. A text from her producer. "White House wants you at off-record lunch. They're not happy about the Vance bump." She smirked. She didn't blame them. The generic ballot had shifted. Not drastically, but meaningfully. Democrats were up by 3, but independents were sliding again, and Biden wasn't on the field anymore to blame. White House Mess Hall, West Wing, 12:30 p.m. The room was cool. Too quiet. Britney sat across from Kelly Dalton, Trump's famously tight-lipped chief of staff. Dalton didn't waste time. "You know the media narrative is spiraling. I know the poll numbers are. Britney said calmly. You're 1 point underwater. Independents are walking. That's manageable, Dalton replied. What concerns me is Vance. Britney arched a brow. You endorsed him in everything but name. I didn't expect him to start early. Or this hard. Dalton's voice dropped. We have a strategy. A timeline. And JD's getting ambitious. Britney took a sip of her coffee. Sounds like you're losing control. We never had control, Dalton said flatly. Only momentum. And that's shifting. He polls at 46%. Rubio at 12%. You said yourself, momentum decides everything. Dalton didn't respond. Instead, she slid a single piece of paper across the table. Britney scanned it. Internal polling? Dalton nodded. World affairs. Voters think a war is coming. I saw Emerson's numbers. 52% believe a world war is likely within 4 years. Then you know what I know, Dalton said. What's that? Americans don't vote based on hope anymore. They vote based on fear. Britney sat back. The quote was chilling. And true. And fear, Dalton added, makes kings. Back at Emerson's D.C. satellite office, Matt Taglia stared at a new dataset on his screen. The trend lines were stable. Too stable. Approval, 45. Disapproval, 46. Independence, still bleeding away. Birthright citizenship, still supported. Deportation policy, still divisive. Belief in looming war, up 2 points from March. Generic 2026 ballot, Democrats +3. But to Matt, the real story wasn't the shift. It was who was positioned to catch the fall. Atlanta, Georgia, 2025. The cafe looked like any other on Peachtree Street. Exposed brick, cold brew on tap, power outlets under every seat. But in the far corner, by the window, 2 women sat with their laptops closed and their phones turned off. Britney Lewis had flown in from D.C. that morning. She didn't bring a cameraman. This wasn't a story for cameras. Across from her sat Danielle Ruiz, a Democratic strategist turned poll whisperer. She wasn't listed on any PAC websites, but her internal memos had shaped more DNC talking points than the chair herself. You're early, Danielle said. The country's drifting. I didn't want to be late. Danielle sipped her espresso and dropped a printed page on the table. It was a summary of voter mood tracking, issue-based sentiment, generic ballot trends, enthusiasm scores, and something she called the collapse index. Britney frowned. What's the index? It's the gap between what voters feel and what they say. When it grows, collapse follows. Collapse of what? Trust. Structure. Leadership. Sometimes all three. Britney scanned the numbers. Congressional trust, 19%. Presidential trust, 38%. Media trust, 24%. Direction of the country, 47% right track, 53% wrong. Independence, 42.59 on direction, -12 on Trump approval. 52% believe a world war is likely. And that number's been rising, Danielle said. Not because of anything we've done. Because no one believes anyone anymore. Even Emerson saw it. Taglia says erosion is more dangerous than collapse. Erosion leads to collapse, she said. Same river, just a few miles upstream. Washington, D.C., West Wing, same day. Kelly Dalton was reviewing draft remarks for a speech Trump was set to give in Phoenix. It was supposed to be about unity, but every line read like a battle cry. She sighed. We can't keep doing this, she muttered. We won. We govern. We don't campaign forever. He doesn't see a difference, said Noah Chase, Deputy Communications Director. That's the problem. The internal polling had confirmed it. The June approval dip had solidified in July and August. Still underwater. Independence hadn't returned. Inflation remained sticky, even as job growth slowed. Gas prices crept back toward $5. And then there was Vance. The Phoenix speech was supposed to showcase unity. Instead, Trump's aides had seen a draft line that read, "If I can't finish the mission, someone younger, hungrier, and just as American will." You know who I mean. Dalton had circled it in red marker. Dangerous. It's a kingmaker line, Noah said. It's a transfer line, she replied. She picked up her phone and typed a message. Clear the line or cancel the speech. We can't let the base move without structure. Meanwhile, in Iowa. Des Moines, Iowa, 2025. The sign on the barn door said, Town Hall, but it felt more like a coronation. J.D. Vance wore no tie, sleeves rolled, coffee in hand. He looked every bit the senator on recess, except this wasn't recess. This was strategy. He didn't need cameras tonight. He needed county chairs, faith leaders, and rural organizers. And they were all here, watching, listening, whispering that he was the future, even before he'd said a word. We're not waiting for a primary calendar, he said quietly. We're building a movement. That line wasn't for applause. It was a signal. One of the local party chairs leaned over to another. Rubio's done. Even if he stays in, it's Vance's field now. Washington, D.C., Emerson office. Matt Taglia poured black coffee into a mug that said, Data is sexy. He hadn't slept well in 3 nights. Not because the numbers were dramatic, but because they weren't. October National Pulse. Trump approval, 44%. Disapproval, 47%. Independents, -13 net disapproval. Right track / wrong track, 46 of 54. Birthright citizenship, still at 68% support. Deportation policy, holding at 52%, too far. War likelihood, next 4 years now at 56%. Emotional volatility index, 63.4%. Presidential generic ballot, 42 of 42. Congressional ballot, Democrats +1. No dramatic movement. No external shocks. And that was the issue. If the storm isn't breaking, Matt said aloud, then pressure's building somewhere else. He typed a note to Britney. Vance is running. He's just not calling it that. And he's building trust before anyone else knows they've lost it. San Francisco, California, Governor's Office. Gavin Newsom stared out the window. Below, cable trucks lined up on the plaza. He was about to announce new wildfire funding, but his staff was whispering about another fire entirely. You saw the polling? His comms director asked. I did, Newsom said. Pete's holding 16. Kamala at 12. You at 12. That's the top of the field. No movement in 3 months. Vance just broke 50 among Republicans in 2 states. Newsom turned. No one wants to go first. Everyone's afraid to look like they're running before Biden says he's done. But he's done. I know that, Newsom said. But politics isn't about knowing. It's about timing. He tapped the window once, like punctuating a thought. And I'm not wasting mine. New York, National Democratic Strategy Meeting. Danielle Rees clicked through slides in a too-bright midtown conference room. If we wait until the convention to find a message, we've already lost. A finance bundler in the back raised a hand. So what do you want? Force Pete to run early? Danielle didn't smile. I want someone who can answer this question honestly. If Trump were off the stage tomorrow, do you know what to say to J.D. Vance? Silence. Because he does. And he's already saying it. Capitol Hill, press room. Britney Lewis faced the cameras. Her WNN segment was live. New polling from Emerson College this week shows continued stagnation for the Biden administration, and for most Democratic hopefuls. What stands out, however, is the consolidation of Republican support behind Senator J.D. Vance. Behind her, a chart showed Vance at 46% GOP support, with Rubio slipping to 10%, and a field of single-digit names falling into obscurity. But the most fascinating number isn't about popularity. Britney continued. It's emotional volatility. Over 63% of Americans now express political anger or fear in public data. That's not a margin of error. That's a warning. Phoenix, Trump's private residence. The president wasn't watching cable news. He was on the phone with a trusted confidant, staring at an old photo of himself and Vance at a 2023 fundraiser. He's smart, Trump said. Knows how to move the crowd. Knows how to look like he's not trying too hard. And if he keeps rising? Trump didn't answer immediately. Then I get the victory, without the war. The voice on the other end didn't respond. Trump leaned back in his chair. Unless he forgets who made him. Iowa, 2 days later. A small local paper ran a headline. Vance visits undecided voters in rural counties. But the subhead said more. Speech focuses on patriotism, strength, and continuity. We won't lose what we've reclaimed. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't national. But it was happening. Every day. Quietly. Like a shadow growing larger as the sun began to set. Palm Beach, Florida, 2025. The golf cart moved slowly along the 15th fairway. Donald Trump drove in silence, his guest seated beside him, Senator J.D. Vance, wearing a red cap and sunglasses, calm as ever. No press. No aides. No Secret Service in earshot. Just two men in the humid November air. You've got something good going, Trump said finally. People like the way you talk. Vance didn't smile. He didn't need to. He knew this wasn't praise, it was a test. I'm not trying to be you, Vance said. I'm trying to make sure what you built doesn't die. Trump pulled the cart to a stop. Let the words hang. That's what DeSantis said too. Vance turned to face him, unblinking. Yeah. But I didn't start a war with you on Twitter. I listened. Trump stared at him. For a moment, the only sound was the wind and a distant lawn mower. Then, you're smart, J.D. Just remember who opened the door. I never forgot, Vance said quietly. And he meant it. But he also knew something Trump didn't. The door is no longer the power, the hallway is. Washington, D.C., Emerson polling office. Matt Taglia stared at the November crosstabs with something approaching resignation. It's locked, he said to no one in particular. Approval, Trump 44/disapprove 48. Independence -14. Right track/wrong track, 45 of 55. Generic congressional ballot, D+1. Presidential ballot, 43 of 43. Emotional volatility index, 64.8. World War concern, 57%. Republican nomination tracking. J.D. Vance, 52%. Rubio, 9%. Others, 6% combined. Undecided, 33%. Democratic field. Buttigieg, 16%. Newsom, 13%. Kamala Harris, 11%. AOC, 8%. Josh Shapiro, 7%. Undecided, 35%. It's like we're in a holding pattern, Matt muttered. But below the clouds, things are shifting. He picked up his phone and texted Britney. If no one moves by January, Vance owns the narrative. And the independents. Los Angeles, governor's residence. Gavin Newsom stood in front of the mirror, tie loose, shirt unbuttoned. A debate prep folder sat unopened on the nightstand. His wife leaned against the doorway. Are you going to do it? He's at 13%. I'm at 13%. We both know Kamala won't break out. So say something. Newsom shook his head. Not until Biden says he's out. What if he never does? He looked down at his hands. Then we lose everything to a man in rolled-up sleeves with no plan but fury. Brooklyn, New York, AOC's community event. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stepped off the stage after a panel on youth organizing. She was met by her deputy chief of staff. You've been polling well with under 30s. You're at 24% among progressives under 35. But still 8% nationally, AOC said. That's just name ID. You're holding your lane. Buttigieg is stalling. Kamala's plateaued. Newsom is non-committal. She wiped sweat from her brow. If they want me to be the face of the future, they'd better be ready to fund it. What about Vance? AOC's voice hardened. He talks like an underdog. But he's climbing like a corporate executive. That's the trick. Capitol Hill, Senate chamber. Marco Rubio stood in an empty corridor after a closed-door caucus. He knew the buzz now wasn't about policy. It was about Vance. He could feel it, the way colleagues paused when he entered, the subtle shift in posture. He was no longer a contender. He was a placeholder. You going to Iowa? One of the younger senators asked him quietly. Rubio nodded. Probably for the last time. The senator offered a sympathetic half-smile. No shame in trying to outswim a tide. Rubio looked at the marble floor. I just didn't think it would turn this fast. New York, WNN studio. Britney Lewis recorded her weekly podcast from the newsroom. The title flashed across the video banner. November, the month of quiet collisions. This week, we saw the GOP field quietly consolidate behind J.D. Vance, even as no formal announcement was made. Meanwhile, the Democratic side remains fragmented, with no candidate breaking out and voter enthusiasm still hovering in the mid-40s. She looked into the camera. But beneath the polling, something else is happening. Americans are no longer just divided, they're emotionally charged, exhausted, and quietly preparing for the next rupture. The question now isn't who's leading. It's who's watching the fault line. Manchester, New Hampshire, 2025. The snow outside was pure, untouched. Inside, the energy was anything but. J.D. Vance stood in front of a fireplace at a private home fundraiser, flanked by 3 former governors and 1 billionaire who owned a tech firm no one could name, but everyone wanted money from. I'm not declaring yet, Vance said plainly. Because the fight hasn't begun. But when it does, we're not starting at zero. The crowd nodded. Not out of excitement, but calculation. Vance wasn't Trump. He wasn't a bomb thrower. He was a tactician, wearing populism like armor and speaking with the poise of a man who'd read every battlefield map. We don't need another decade of polite collapses, he said. We need outcomes. A woman near the piano whispered to her husband. He's already president. He just doesn't live there yet. Washington, D.C., Emerson data room. Matt Taglia stared at his December final report. Trump approval, 43%. Disapproval, 49%. Independent net disapproval, -15. Generic presidential ballot, still tied 43 of 43. Dems lead in Congress, now +0, a statistical tie. Emotional volatility index, 66.3%. Likelihood of world war, next 4 years 58%. But the most telling number? GOP nomination likelihood index, internal forecast. Vance, 58%. Rubio, 8%. Undecided, 25%. He picked up his phone. Matt, text to Britney. He broke 58. January's too late. It's already over. Atlanta, Georgia, private DNC summit. Danielle Ruiz stood at the head of a long conference table. Screens around her showed scatterplots of emotional resonance by candidate. We need to stop acting like this is 2020. What do you mean? Asked a mid-level strategist. I mean Vance is not Trump. He doesn't implode. He sharpens. Every time he speaks, he gains. She clicked her remote. Democrats are trapped between nostalgia and hesitation. And that's a losing formula. She pointed to a name glowing in bold. Gavin Newsom, 14%. Buttigieg, 15%. Kamala Harris, 10%. AOC, 9%. Josh Shapiro, 8%. Undecided, 36%. There is no leader. There is only drift. New York, WNN year-end broadcast. Britney Lewis sat across from a panel of journalists and ex-officials. The year-end review was supposed to be celebratory. Instead, it was somber. J.D. Vance has not declared, but continues to poll above 55% among Republicans. Former President Trump has not discouraged the momentum. And on the Democratic side? One of the panelists asked. We've seen stagnation. Movement only in the margins. The only real shift is emotional, not strategic. The host turned to Britney. So what's the biggest story no one's covering? She didn't hesitate. The fact that over 66% of voters are operating in a state of political anxiety or anger. It's not a subplot. It's the main event. And it's being ignored. Los Angeles, Governor's Mansion. Gavin Newsom stood on the balcony, phone to his ear. The call was with a bundler in Chicago. He's going to run, Gavin. And he's going to win unless someone stops him. Newsom looked at the Pacific. You want me to jump off a cliff without a net? No. I want you to jump before the cliff disappears. Washington, D.C., White House residence. President Trump sat alone in the residence, eyes fixed on a muted TV screen playing old footage of him from 2016. His chief of staff, Kelly Dalton, entered quietly. You ready for January? They still think I'm running, he said with a grin. Are you? Trump didn't answer. Instead, he stood and walked toward the window. The most powerful man in the room isn't always the one on the ballot. Dalton frowned. But the man on the ballot sets the rules. Not if the rules are already written. Iowa, 2 days later. A local journalist snapped a photo of J.D. Vance shaking hands with a woman in front of a church. The caption was simple. The candidate who hasn't declared, but everyone's already following. Des Moines, Iowa, January 12, 2026. The auditorium was small by design. Only 300 seats, mostly filled with early state activists, faith leaders, local reporters. No arena, no LED wall, no fireworks. But the air was electric. The banner behind the podium was stark and simple. J.D. Vance, Restore the Republic. There were no introductions. No hype man. Just Vance, in a dark jacket, stepping into the frame as if he were walking into court. He paused, looked out over the crowd, and began. I told you I wasn't running. I meant it, until now. No applause yet. He wasn't done. For too long, we've been told we have to choose between chaos and compromise. Between collapse and cowardice. I don't believe that anymore. We've survived the storms. But now we need something else, a compass. And that's what I intend to be. He looked straight into the cameras. Today, I'm officially announcing my candidacy for President of the United States. The room erupted. Not in the usual forced cheer, but in that rare, primal confirmation that something just shifted permanently. Washington, D.C., Emerson Data Center. Matt Taglia watched the live stream in silence. His intern leaned in. So, what happens now? Matt didn't blink. Now the race begins. And everyone else is already behind. He refreshed the dashboard. Republican primary prediction model. Vance, 63%. Rubio, 7%. Others, 4%. Undecided, 26%. Democratic generic field, still fragmented. National Emotional Volatility Index, 67.9%. Belief in world war within 4 years, 59%. Trump approval, holding at 43%. Independence, now breaking +3 for Vance against all Dems tested. Matt closed the window. He waited just long enough. And now he owns the next 12 months. San Francisco, Newsom's office. Gavin Newsom held the remote in one hand, phone in the other. He's in, his comms director said. I know. You want a presser? Newsom stood, walked to the window, then shook his head. Not yet. I want to see who follows him off the ledge first. New York, WNN studio. Britney Lewis sat in studio as breaking news rolled across the ticker. Vance announces presidential run. She turned to the camera. After months of speculation, Senator J.D. Vance has made it official. He is the first major Republican to enter the 2028 race, and he enters it not as an underdog, but as the clear frontrunner. She glanced at the camera again. And for the Democrats? The question tonight is no longer when. It's, who can actually beat him? White House, West Wing. President Trump sat with Kelly Dalton in the treaty room. He did it, she said flatly. Trump nodded. I know. So, what now? Trump leaned back. A long pause. Now? Now I find out if he learned everything I taught him. Brooklyn, AOC's campaign loft. The TV was still on. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez paced the floor, laptop in one hand, her phone buzzing endlessly. She stopped by the window, staring out into the January night. We can't wait, she said to no one in particular. Philadelphia, Josh Shapiro HQ. Pete's frozen. Newsom's hesitating. Kamala's boxed in. AOC has the kids, but not the party. His aide looked confused. So what are you saying, Governor? Shapiro smiled. I'm saying, if we wait until summer, we'll be running against a narrative, not a candidate. Miami, Rubio's private office. He turned off the TV. No emotion. Just numbers in his notebook. Then, quietly, almost to himself. That's it. We're done. Iowa Vance campaign bus. J.D. Vance sat near the window, watching farmland drift by in the dark. Where to next? Asked his aide. Vance didn't look away from the window. Wherever the Republic starts over. Epilogue. National Field Report, Emerson College Polling, January 2026. J.D. Vance, officially declared GOP candidate. National GOP support, 63%. Democratic field, no declared major candidate. National Emotional Volatility Index, 68.5%. Media Trust, 22%. Congressional approval, 17%. Belief in major conflict within 4 years, 60%. Voters are not angry. They are preparing. They are not undecided. They are watching. J.D. Vance shook hands in a Des Moines brewery with a crowd of 50. Cameras were off. The unofficial campaign was in full swing, and the message was sharp. No apologies on immigration. No soft talk on foreign policy. No separation from Trump, only continuation. His internal team had one goal: freeze the field early. If he could lock in support in Iowa and South Carolina by fall, Rubio would be irrelevant by Thanksgiving. You polling independents yet? He asked his strategist. We're modeling them through turnout proxies, but yeah, early signs are good. I want full briefs. I want to know what Emerson knows before Emerson knows it. He wasn't joking. Back in Atlanta, 4 p.m. Britney and Danielle were still talking. You're not worried about the Democrats? Britney asked. Danielle nodded. Of course I am. Buttigieg is on top at 16%, but that's not dominance. Kamala's fading. Newsom's coasting. AOC is peaking early. We're not ready. No frontrunner. No fire. And no plan for Vance. Britney leaned forward. You think he can win it? Danielle hesitated. If the economy breaks before 2026? If foreign conflict escalates? If Trump stays out of his way? She didn't finish the thought. The answer's yes. Britney's phone buzzed again. This time, it was Matt Taglia. You tracking the war sentiment line? Yeah, she texted back. It's climbing again. How bad? Another 1.5 points. We're at 53.7% now. Damn. I'll send the files. Britney looked at Danielle. You were right. Collapse is coming. Question is, who survives it? Danielle nodded slowly. Or worse, who thrives in it? New York City, 2025. The set lights were too bright, the air too cold. Pete Buttigieg adjusted his lapel mic and forced a smile. He hated cable appearances, but the DNC had made it clear, visibility matters now. Across from him, the host smirked with the casual cruelty that passed for journalism these days. Mayor Pete, excuse me, Secretary, your numbers are good. But 16% on the national ballot still doesn't make you the frontrunner, does it? Pete smiled. The kind of tight, polite smile that masked exhaustion. It's a long runway. I'm not running yet, but I'm not hiding either. The interview moved through the usual tropes: climate policy, infrastructure, faith, electability. But it never touched what the country really wanted to hear. Not until the last 60 seconds. Do you think J.D. Vance is dangerous? Pete blinked. I think extremism packaged in calm language is still extremism. Washington, D.C., Emerson College Satellite Office. Matt Taglia sat alone in the briefing room, staring at the new crosstabs. The numbers were stubbornly consistent, and that was the problem. Trump approval, 45%. Disapproval, 46%. Independence, still -12. Direction of country, 47 of 53. World war likelihood, now 54.9%. Democratic generic lead, slipping to +2. Presidential generic ballot, tied, again, at 42%. But something else had changed. He opened a file labeled Emotional Volatility Markers, September Index. A new data layer they'd been testing. Tracking not just political alignment, but emotional intensity. Anger. Fear. Apathy. All scraped anonymously from public posts and survey tone shifts. Anger was up 6%. Apathy was down. That meant engagement, but not the good kind. When apathy dies, someone's about to start yelling. Matt muttered. Phoenix, Arizona, later that week. Donald Trump stood in front of 20,000 people. He wasn't campaigning, not officially, but he never really stopped. They said I couldn't win again. I proved them wrong. They said I couldn't govern again. And here we are. The crowd roared. Now they say we're headed for war. And you know what I say? It's because they let the world walk all over us. The speech walked the line between grievance and nationalism. Then came the phrase Dalton had tried to cut. And if I ever can't finish this mission, someone younger, stronger, and just as America first will carry it on. A beat. Then, you know who I mean. The crowd erupted into chants of J.D. 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 Backstage, Kelly Dalton threw the note pages into a chair. He just made him the heir. In prime time. Noah Chase nodded grimly. It's done. Miami, Florida, Rubio Campaign HQ. Marco Rubio paced the room. Two staffers sat silently, waiting for him to speak. We're wasting time, he finally said. This party isn't looking for leadership. They're looking for vengeance. Then maybe we lean harder into national security, one aide suggested. Vance owns that lane now. He talks like a Marine. The base eats it up. Rubio shook his head. We need to start talking like we're not part of the past. Or we're done. Silence. We may be done anyway. DNC headquarters, Washington, D.C. Danielle Rees presented to a room of tired operatives and undercaffeinated aides. The progressive base is stalled. Kamala can't break 12%. Newsom refuses to commit. Pete's doing okay, but he doesn't ignite. She flipped to the next slide. It was the real problem. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance is consolidating the GOP. Independents don't love him, but they're not rejecting him either. And Gen Z? Half of them can't tell the difference between his populism and economic justice rhetoric. An older strategist scoffed. Because we're not defining him. Danielle turned to him. Cold. Because he's defining us first. New Jersey, that night. Britney Lewis sat on her front porch, notepad in her lap, staring out at a quiet suburban street. Her phone buzzed with a message from Matt. Emotional volatility broke 60%. We're in unstable territory now. Media's ignoring it. The data isn't. She stared at the message. If collapse is coming, she whispered. This is the silence before the shift. She picked up her pen and wrote 3 words across the top of a new notebook page. What happens next? And underneath, one more. Vance.